Hello and welcome. Today, we're journeying into a unique realm of wellness and relaxation that some of you might not be very familiar with, but it's becoming increasingly popular worldwide. We're going to dive into the world of sensory deprivation tanks, also known as isolation tanks or float tanks, with our special guest, Jason Krauss from Levity Wellness. Levity Wellness is a wellness center known for offering unique experiences that aid in relaxation, in meditation, and overall health. He's going to help us demystify the experience of floating and enlighten us on its benefits. Whether you're a health enthusiast looking for new ways to relax and rejuvenate, or someone just really in need of an experience that helps to bring some calm, you're going to learn a way to do that today. Let's go ahead and dive into our conversation. Jason Krauss, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the wonderful intro.
Well,
Glad to be.
It's good to have you. And we're just going to jump right in. And I'd love for you to give me an overview of what Levity Wellness is all about.
Yeah. So Levity Wellness, it was actually founded about 9 years ago. My wife and I bought the business as longtime clients shortly after COVID in April of 21. Levity Wellness itself is really focused on mental and physical wellness. I myself have struggled with my health for years and found that most medical care that you receive, in the sense of your clinical medical care, was more sick care than health care. That they're treating a symptom, they're treating a problem you're having in the moment, but not really giving you great tools moving forward. With that, a lot of the mental aspect is lost. And I found that levity and floating in particular has a profound effect in that arena, and found that many times when the mind is right, it helps the body get right faster. And there really isn't any necessary magic to it. It's more of centering oneself. And I am not one to heavily delve into mindfulness or practices because I feel it's very unique, that everyone has their own practices and the way they go about it. But floating was a very unique vehicle for that, in the sense that whether you use it for prayer, whether you use it just for silence and peace, or whether you truly use it as something therapeutic, as just an Epsom bath, which essentially is what it is, that it had benefits for folks all across the spectrum, so to say.
That's fantastic. And you're so incredibly right about the way that medicine tends to approach, or just the typical way of doing things. When we approach a health problem, we sometimes go right at that particular area of concern, and we'll do all sorts of things to work on that one thing. But health is so much bigger than one particular area of concern. It's definitely physically getting our body working right, chemically supporting our body in a way that it can function the way that it needs to, and emotionally being healthy, handling our stress really well. Putting those different pieces together is going to take us so much farther than just simply going after one particular area of the body. So it's really cool, some of what you're saying about what you're doing and how it has an effect on stress. So help me, for those that may not be familiar with the concept, could you describe what, and correct any of my language if I get something incorrect here, but what is a sensory deprivation tank, if I'm saying it correctly, and how does it work?
So sensory deprivation tanks, and that was really the initial name for it, because the intention was, the individual who designed it, John Lilly, had this theory. He was a neuropsychologist and neuroscientist, that what happens if we turn off input to the brain to an extent? What happens if we put an individual in an isolated environment that is weightless? The water mimics skin temperature, so does the air, and it's silent. What does the brain do in that state? For years, there was a ton of research done by himself and his partner. It became more commercialized or common practice in the late 70s and into the 80s. In the early 90s, there was a whole trend of samadhi and samadhi your body and some of these other trends that were coming up with mindfulness. But ultimately, going now into the early 20s, if you will, mindfulness has made a very big comeback, and people are really starting to realize the importance of that mental health aspect. So the sensory deprivation tank itself, as it was formerly known, we try to steer away from deprivation because it tends to have a negative connotation. The more updated term around it has been REST as an acronym, reduced environment stimulus therapy.
Ah,
So
okay.
essentially rest, and it is in its truest form a deep form of rest. And so with a flotation tank or flotation therapy, there's dozens of types now. It's really come a long way. We personally have a custom built tub that's much bigger and more open so it doesn't feel so confined. And a lot of that was to introduce folks to floating because of a lot of the concerns were claustrophobia or what if it locks or just kind of general fear from the unknown. And the Samadhi tank, which is the more traditional that we've had for a number of years there on site, is an enclosed compartment essentially. And it has a liner on the inside. It is filled with roughly 250, 300 gallons of reverse osmosis water that is treated with an Epsom or magnesium sulfate solution that is your very close to what you buy at the store when you go to soak your ankle with Epsom salt in the tub. The difference is we put about 8 to 900 pounds in each tank. So it is a massive amount of salt that we use on site. Everything's covered in salt. It's a joke around there. But the salt itself, it creates a density to the water that actually changes the gravity. So as you lay in the tank, it is completely weightless. You don't have to fight or the typical body response in water where you're trying to hold yourself out of the water. It really cradles you and really holds you. Despite size, I'm a larger guy. I'm about 240 pounds and about 6'1". And it's completely effortless. It's the easiest thing you can do all day. You lay there and you focus on your breath and you allow your mind to calm. You let the light escape from your eyes, and some folks have had very lucid daydreams. I know I have in the hundreds of floats I've done, to some that are much more emotional work, working through thoughts that you've had or problems that you've come across emotionally or even professionally, personally, things of that nature. And one of the biggest counter arguments, if you will, that we get is, I don't know if I could spend an hour alone with my thoughts. And what's funny is after about 4 minutes, even if you're really stressed or really focused on something, you're already wondering what's for lunch tomorrow, or what am I going to do the next day, or and your brain just starts to do what it needs to. It almost gives it space to really think through the things that it's concerned about, not your consciousness. And so it's a very interesting concept. I'm ADHD. I'm bouncing off the walls. I am one of those that never stops. I have constant ideas. I drive my wife crazy with all of my ideas. And I don't sit still well and I don't meditate well. I'll be very honest. Not everybody can do it. And a lot of folks, especially this day and age, yeah, that's great for meditation and journaling, but I'm not good at it or I'm not consistent or whatever the thread may be for them. For me, I always understood the value in those things growing up around martial arts. And one of my first jobs being at Miraval here, the resort spa, and mindfulness being one of their biggest tenets. But I always struggled with the practice. My consistency and my ability to calm myself and do the work, so to say, was never great. I found the float tanks up in Portland, the float shop, and one of the long-standing shops here in the country. They do a marvelous job there. They really do. And my wife and I found it on an anniversary trip. And I thought, float, what is a float? Are we going for ice cream? Or what is this? And so I started to look into it more and I thought, I have nothing else going on this evening. What the heck? Let's give it a shot. And I had such a profound, very vivid daydream type of experience with it that for me, the amount of calm was almost exciting coming out of the tank. I have to find this back home. Where is this? So there are a few home-based businesses that do it here locally. I always felt like I was intruding, just my own personal feeling with it. But I really love the therapy, and I really find that there's so much efficacy for it for a number of different uses. So I found myself at Levity shortly after they opened and had been a long-term client on a regular basis, anywhere from 1 to 3 times a month, depending on what was going on in my life, and sometimes 3 or 4 months where I wouldn't float because I was in a very good space. And it has become a very useful tool in so many ways mentally to give yourself some space and allow the constant chatter of your brain to slow down and have a moment.
That's fantastic. And I can see different areas that can really make a difference in our health. I'd like for you to let me know. You had mentioned that it's been shown to have efficacy in a lot of different areas. What are the general things that we see, or what are some of the potential benefits that someone can see when they are using a Samadhi tank?
Mhm. So we're very fortunate. We have a champion in our industry, and his name is Dr. Justin Feinstein. He's a neurologist out of the University of Vancouver, Washington. Brilliant man who loves floating. And when he found it, he was pretty much at the forefront of dealing with a lot of the opiate issues that were happening, as well as seeing what was happening to the mental health in our country due to our exposure to technology and the speed in which we ingest information. So he was really the champion behind it, and somebody that I find his TED Talks very interesting. He talks at our industry conferences every year, but he has ultimately been the champion for us, and he has started a 501c3 through clinicalfloat.org to essentially start not only gathering funds and fundraising, but also clinical testing around floating. What does it actually do? Not just the mysticism or the magic of, oh, I felt great coming out, but I couldn't explain it or I couldn't quantify it. Dr. Feinstein has been essentially doing pre and post float surveys, if you will, very similar to what you get at the hospital or a doctor's office or even in your practice, right? Where are you? What are you feeling? How's your pain
Yeah.
levels? Things of that nature. And then, as well, in his setup there in Washington, they've been doing an open float tank type of concept. So it's like an open pool, a round open pool. And they hook folks up to blood pressure monitors, monitoring their cortisol levels, and monitoring their heart rate. And what they have found consistently, despite health, age, any of these other variables that typically can affect the outcome of a therapy, they have consistently found within the first 15 minutes of a float, your blood pressure drops by 40% in a healthy manner. Your heart rate, your pulse drops by 40% in a healthy manner, and your cortisol levels, the higher they are, cortisol being the stress hormone, your cortisol levels plummet in a healthy way. And why is that happening? And what they're finding is that by being in that reduced environment without input, your brain is able to shut off in certain areas. There's no smell, so that area of your brain can go dark, so to say. Same with sight and sound. And so now you have three of your major senses that have basically diverted that energy elsewhere in your thought processes. And it allows for the brain to actually slip into what is referred to as the theta state. And theta state is between deep sleep and consciousness. It's basically like a daydream. And so, interestingly enough, that even for someone like myself that can't sit still, I can slip into that daydream state without a whole lot of effort and be able to float for anywhere from, I've done floats as short as 50 minutes, and some floats I've done as long as 5 hours.
Whoa. I didn't know.
So,
I had no idea you can do it for that long. That's
you
awesome.
can. Yeah, the high salt content in the water prevents you from pruning like you typically do, like in the pool or in the
Oh,
tub for
yeah.
too long type of thing. So you don't prune up and it doesn't affect your skin in a bad way. In fact, the amount of magnesium that's in the salt is one of the best ways to absorb that as a nutrient is through the skin. And you come out of it almost buttery because your skin is just so like rehydrated and fleshed out. So it really, there are a number of great benefits to it. Now, I will be honest in that not everybody falls in love with it. It's the willingness to be vulnerable and give yourself that space and be able to relax and allow yourself to let down your guard doesn't work for everyone. Some folks, it's counterintuitive to their nature. Now, at the same time, we have folks from all walks of life that come through. Everything from a mother of five that just needs an hour of silence because she can't, and to violent crimes detectives, to veterans who've seen combat and seen a number of really difficult things that they deal with, and they find that the tank is the only place they can find solace because it's the one place they know I'm safe. And it's the one place they know they can turn all of that off. And so we have heard all different spectrums of it. Some folks that come out and, oh, that was great, thanks, bye. and not much feedback, to others that have sat and had hour-long conversations with us, bearing their soul almost, and being very vulnerable and telling us about their lives and their stresses and the things that they go through because they feel so comfortable in their own skin coming out of that treatment.
That's really fantastic. It's interesting. You're coming at this in so many different ways, from using the magnesium and all of the health benefits that we see from
Mm-hmm.
magnesium, and the fact that you're in there and your body just absorbs it so easily. That all by itself can have some really great benefits, and then you combine that with this reduced environment stimulus that has that relaxing, stress relieving effect. Seems like it should be really powerful. This is fantastic. Quick question. So you were talking about this. I'm a pretty big guy, and so I'm imagining getting into this pool of water, and you're saying that I can get into this water, this solution, and I can float without even trying to.
You actually have to put in effort not to. So the example being, and we've had individuals that, I think our tallest individual that has been in our tank was 6'10" or 11 in our larger tub. And I think he was closer to 300 pounds and had no issue and enjoyed it. It's the density of the water itself. So despite your weight, build, or size, you don't float more or less depending on that. The
Yeah.
specific gravity in the tank is essentially 25% less than what you typically experience in water. And so there is no fight to it. When you actually get into the tank, you'll find yourself almost pushing down to get your hands into the bottom of the tank to let yourself back into the water. And you feel it really push you up. And it's funny because people ask, what if I fall asleep? Would I drown? And you have to actually push your head back to the point where you would even get your eyes under the water. It
Yeah.
takes effort to actually get beneath the surface. It's so dense. And so it absolutely will hold you. And for those that like to see candid feedback from other shops around the world, or even celebrities or athletes that use it, because we can go a whole different route here in the sense that Steph Curry, who's won multiple NBA championships and is known for his cool demeanor, has one in his house. And he is a firm believer in what he refers to as the floats. And he loves what it does for him in a mental perspective because it allows for him to dial in. And it allows for him, and you'll see it during games, you have somebody's hand right in his face and he'll drain a 3-pointer from 45 feet out. And it's
Mhm.
incredible. And a lot of that comes back, to focus. To me, it's a lot about focus. And the tank allows for that acuity to where you can stop and really game plan in there and have that moment to yourself. And in the same moment, I've put my 9-year-old son in the tank and thought he would last 20, 30 minutes. And after an hour and a half, I went and had to get him out. And his first response was, Dad, I'm floating, like I was being intrusive, like I ended it too quickly. But he found from it, and he's musically gifted. He came home and started playing songs that he had heard months ago. And so it's a very interesting interaction that happens in that tank. And it honestly, the reason I say it's so unique to the individual is it's really, what does your brain need and what is your brain capable of? So years ago, and the True Rest franchise is one of the biggest in the country. And True Rest has a number of locations throughout the states. Their chief franchising officer is actually the daughter of a Navy SEAL. And her father had mentioned the use of them for advanced learning during the SEALs, that it wasn't necessarily for the other benefits. They were using it for conversational language training. They were listening to a foreign language they didn't know in a 6-week program and learning 6 months of information in 6 weeks. So there's this real power to the separation of input and being able to select that input for yourself. And as a as an individual, if you come in and you're not comfortable in the dark, don't turn off the light. It's your float. Do what you'd like. The light is at your control. If you're like me, that's a purist to it, and you want complete darkness and silence and deal with some things, have at it. If you want music, and we have a number of folks that do, they love the benefit of the feeling of A, the magnesium, and B, the weightlessness. They come in and put on podcasts. They come in and they put on binaural tones and sound frequency type therapy on their YouTube channels or whatever it may be. We're very open to that because we understand that it's a personal thing. This
Yeah.
is space for you to do what you need to do.
That's fantastic. Do you think are actually no, do are there will would there be any kind of contraindications or reason why maybe someone couldn't, if someone, because we're talking about this, our community is going to be learning so much about what it is that you guys do, and this is a amazing. I plan on visiting you guys very soon,
Absolutely.
but I know that we're going to have some people that are interested. Is there any like contraindication, or is there anyone who wouldn't benefit from this?
So the one thing, there's a couple things, and not anything serious. For example, I have some friends that were former scuba divers, and they have perforated eardrums. And because of that, it's not necessarily recommended because there's no way to completely water seal the ears. We offer earplugs, but it's not perfect, and that level of salinity in the water can be painful. So that's one. If you have a perforated eardrum or the eardrum tubes, for example, not necessarily completely recommended. And the one thing that we always focus back on, ask your doctor. If you have a condition, for example, any kind of an external insulin pump, colostomy bag, anything of that sort, to where you have a port that is puncturing the skin, talk with your doctor first. We do have folks that have floated with oxygen, that have oxygen dependencies, and they just use a longer cord to run out of the side of the tank. We've had folks that have essentially disconnected different bags or ports that they have attached and seal that off. There are ways to float with a number of those. The other piece is if you have, for example, I myself have a little bit of eczema. When it's really flaring up, I don't recommend the tank. It's that salt will burn. At the same time, the funny part is that you will find every nick and scratch that you have on you the moment you climb in that tank because,
Oh yeah.
whoa, what was that? That's really salty. Now, that being said, it lasts 30 seconds, maybe a minute before it completely fades.
It'll burn, but it can be
Those,
incredibly healing, it sounds
yeah,
like. Yeah.
absolutely. And those with epilepsy, severe epilepsy, or any kind of severe schizophrenia, things like that, where they would lose sight of where they are, maybe even dementia, conditions like that, maybe not as highly recommended without a medical assist or a sitter. We personally don't have a medical assist available in house, but we are open to those that have a medical assist available to them, meaning that if you have an,
Then that
and
person would be able to be there with them potentially
yeah,
if their need is there. Okay.
yep, absolutely. And essentially, as far as contradictions, we haven't really seen any. In
Hmm.
fact, it's one of the only treatments that they've found that is working for anorexia nervosa,
Oh.
to where folks can actually unwind a little bit and have some success and efficacy in therapy with it. Myself, and I don't know if you can actually see it here, but I have a scar on the side of my neck here that I sat out of bed and I broke my neck. I actually, here, since you zoomed in there, in April 2016, I sat out of bed and shattered a disc between C6 and C7. And completely freak thing. I had never hurt my neck. I had never
Oh
had
my
shoulder
goodness.
injuries. Very traumatic, bizarre moment. I went from being in my early 30s and feeling immortal to feeling very fragile, just like that. As well, of course, because it's spinal surgery, they load you up on opiates and they
Hmm.
send you home. I had a real rough go of it with the opiates, to just put it lightly, quickly. And I found myself, as soon as that wound was healed, I was back in the tank on a regular basis. The adjustment and learning how to sleep again with hardware in my neck, the adjustment of my range of motion, the adjustment of the withdrawals from the opiates, all those things came into play as I got back in the tank and found myself really drawn back to it, that I am okay. These moments are just hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was something that I used it for recovery. And prior to that, it was always for relaxation. It was, I just need a minute. I want to have a clear head. And so it was much less a need and much more of a want initially for myself. And as that became more of a need, and as I myself have been in therapy for years, I'm a strong believer in it. The one thing about therapy, though, is you always have to start over and tell somebody your story. You always have to start from the beginning and then tell them what's wrong. In the tank, you know your story, you know the ins and outs, you know where it started and where you're at. And so it gives you this great vehicle for kind of self alignment. And I strongly recommend it, especially for guys our age, most of us are not willing to admit that I'm not okay or that I need to speak to somebody. And so instead of, I think this is a really great alternative. In the same breath, and to really speak to what you do for a living, chiropraction and posture is so important for your health. And it's so important to have good alignment of the spine so that systems are functioning the way they should be. And one thing that we've found from this, and actually in working with a occupational therapist who's a close friend of mine out of San Diego, and funny enough, occupational therapist in San Diego, but works remotely for Pima College here in Tucson. Her focus and the PhD that she works through, their focus was posture. And one thing they started to find was not only does chiropraction and occupational therapy help with posture, but floating did too. And it had quite the effect when paired with these other things, that it is not a cure-all by any means. And I don't advertise it as a guarantee or a cure-all in any way, but I advertise it as it is an incredible tool to add to these things. And it has such an interesting space that it fills that I've found it to be very impactful. And even for myself, when I come out of the tank, I feel 2 or 3 inches taller. I feel like my posture has been realigned and relaxed a little bit. I'm not forcing it to try and sit up straight and keep the chin back and all those proper things. It just happens naturally because the body has had a chance to realign.
Yeah, you lose that pressure that gravity tends to create on us. And as that pressure is relieved, you actually might feel taller and definitely can have an impact on your posture. That's pretty amazing. You mentioned it's almost like having therapy without the therapist, which is really cool. And it's wonderful that you were able to find something that was going to have a positive impact on your health. And even more wonderful that you were then able to take that and start having a positive impact on others. It's really fantastic to see the things that you are doing here in our community. What do you see as the future of this type of work, the future of floating, the future of the samadhi tanks, the future of reduced environment stimulus training? What do you see in the future?
So for me and for us at Levity, we have always jokingly said we're closer to science than we are to crystals and chakras. I believe in those things, and I think that folks that practice in different ways, there's a million different faiths out there. And so it's important to have what you have and hold that dear. But to me, this isn't just about faith, and this isn't just about the soul within the tank. There's so much science to this, and I struggled with my health for a number of years through a couple different conditions between my neck and a hereditary condition that I have, and I found that in those moments, there's not an advocate, there's not an in between going to your primary care and the ER for something that's really wrong, and finding a sense of peace, finding a sense of stability. The float tank played a big part in that. And so where I see that headed is that because of our closeness to science as opposed to the mysticism, with the work that Feinstein's doing in the 501c3 and the push to get this closer to clinical, our goal, our mission is to fight big pharma in some way. And we all say big pharma as it's this one entity, but it is a massive industry. It's not one entity. And by fight, it's the funding that is put into and the amount of allowance that is given to give you opiates instead of let's try an anti-inflammatory that's non-addictive and occupational therapy and physical therapy and chiropraction. And let's get the way you walk, the way you sit, the way you interact every day to be healthier, coupled with, I don't know, maybe nutrition, things of that manner that really matter as to how your body is made up and how your body functions, to be all in symphony, for lack of a better term. And because healthcare itself, I think our healthcare system has the wrong name. That's urgent care, that's sick care, it's emergent care. And that wellness and healthcare are really one and the same. If you want to feel good on a daily basis, you have to have good habits. And that's from eating right, sleeping right, getting the right therapies, whether that's mental or physical. And I feel that this fits in nicely with so many different types of practices. That if you had an individual that was really having muscular issues and you're able to adjust them well, but muscularly they're just not getting to where they need to be able to refer them to a great massage therapist that can do neuromuscular trigger point, and to be able to go in and float before the massage so the massage therapist can really get into those spots. Those all work in concert. And to me, I think the biggest atrocity, if you will, within our industry is the fact that it's considered a luxury, that your health, your well-being is a luxury. And so for me, my goal and the future state that I see with this is more acceptance within the realm of insurance. As long as we are not a socialized country when it comes to medicine, these things should be covered by your healthcare provider. If it involves your health and your wellness and your ability to get back to do your job, to be a parent, to be a great spouse, to be just a contributing member of society, those things are all important. And to me, if you're going to pay that much money every month for insurance, you should be able to pick that path and what works best for you, because there really isn't an advocate out there for you unless you're either juvenile or geriatric. As an adult, you're expected to just know what's best for you and go do it.
Yep.
And so I really hope to drive more and more awareness to this, to the point where Feinstein's 501c3 gets us more accepted through insurance. Now, we've made some big steps. We personally accept HSA or health spending accounts. So we're close, and we know that those that work for bigger companies that offer that, that's a huge help, because that's a pre-tax money that gives them access to this. We offer discount. Yeah, it really helped us. We offer discounts to teachers, first responders, and anyone in the military realm, meaning a veteran, active duty members, or their spouses or family. Because that sacrifice is familial. It's not just individual. When it comes to military and first responders, what the spouses have to help support them through, what their family sees them go through, to us, it's important. It affects the entire family, not just the individual.
Absolutely, it does. Yeah, you're so right. And it's so great, the things that you're offering. If someone wants to get a hold of you and they're ready now to start doing something about their health, doing something about their stress, checking you guys out, what would be the first step for them? How would they go about finding you?
So the easiest way to really learn about, and there's a ton of information, probably too much, is our website, which is levityrising.com. The other option is our phone number, which is 520-339-6674, and you can text us anytime. You can call for appointments, and we have just a phenomenal staff. My wife, Lindsay, and I run more of the ownership operations, and we have an individual named Gordon that runs the shop himself, most day-to-day operations. And all of our massage therapists are contractors, because we wanted to make sure that they are receiving the compensation they so rightly deserve for the treatments that they do. And as you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We've had all kinds of questions from across the board. Can I bring in my 90-year-old mother if I help her? Can I bring in my 7-year-old son who's really dealing with some trauma? Can I bring in one that was really interesting was my 12-year-old grandson. Part of his space camp was canceled and he didn't get to do the sensory deprivation tank. Can we come in and just talk science about it with you and him get a flow? Absolutely. Or fears about it. I'm afraid of the dark. I'm afraid of water. I have concern that I can't make an hour. Those are all conversations that we've had. And we know that this is very personal and that you're going to have your own quirks, so to say. We all do. For myself, I love to float more than 90 minutes. And so I have to be very intentional when I do, because there's times where I'll float for 3 or 4 hours. And it really just comes back to what the person needs. And we're there for folks as they need it.
That's amazing. All right. Thank you for that. And this was great. You've given us so much information, and I think we're going to be able to use this in a way, hopefully for those of you that are watching, that you have learned something about this practice, that if you're feeling overwhelmed by stress or just simply not as healthy as you want to be, there are directions we can go. We can go the typical medical route where we're addressing one specific symptom, or we can start looking at having a whole body approach to our health. It's something we talk about all the time. Are we making sure that our body physically is functioning at its optimum? Are we making sure that our nutrition is right in the spot that it needs to be, so that we're supporting all those chemical processes that are happening in the body, so that we're developing the way that we need to? Are we dealing with our stress in a way that's going to help us to truly be healthy, in a way that's going to help us work through some of the things that we're all going through? Everyone's going through something. This reduced environment stimulus training that is happening at Levity Wellness is something that really seems like it's a worthwhile thing to not just look into, but definitely to start. So I'm excited to be able to have this conversation with you. I think our community is going to be excited to learn about this. And I'm going to make sure somewhere on this video there's going to be your contact information so that people can get a hold of you. So you'll probably see that either down in the description, guys, or maybe just sitting here at the bottom of the video. So thank you, Jason. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Doug.
And are there any parting words that you want to leave?
Yeah, just don't be afraid of it. Everybody is afraid of themselves and their own thoughts, but as much as we can be our own worst enemy, we're also our own best friend. And it's hard sometimes to remember that ultimately you are your greatest advocate, whether you feel like you are or not, whether it's in the throes of depression or chronic pain or even cancer remission or things of that nature. When things do feel hopeless, sometimes maybe you just need a break from that. Maybe you just need to give yourself 5 minutes, well, in this case, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever's comfortable for you, a chance to relax. And combining these therapies is a really great way to induce deep rest, in the sense that a float and a massage followed by an early bedtime makes for a great following day.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much for being a part of this. And for those of you that are interested in a float session with Levity Wellness and Mr. Jason Krauss, go ahead and check out their website. Their phone number will also be here somewhere along this video. And I hope you have a great day. Thanks for joining us.